Welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm your host, Sarah Dean. This show is for women leaders who are committed to advancing both their own leadership and the leadership of those around them. In each episode, I offer practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you become a more confident, compassionate, and curious leader. The truth is, you were born to lead. So let's start now, together. Hello, shameless leaders. Today, we're going to get a little uncomfortable. Are you ready? We're going to talk about disagreeing. And if you were socialized as a woman, disagreeing with someone else might be one of the most uncomfortable things you can think of. And we know that disagreeing is really important. And we know that disagreeing and hearing each other's perspectives often is the pathway to coming up with new solutions and creative solutions and innovative solutions. And yet we shy away from disagreements at all costs because we're afraid of disappointment and we're afraid of things getting too uncomfortable. We don't actually have, in most cases, skill sets around how to disagree with each other. And that makes it all the more uncomfortable. If I don't know how to do something, if I don't know how to water ski, I'm going to be super intimidated to go try it for the first time, right? And then the first couple times I tried, I'm going to be fumbly and messy and I might not want to do it again. And I'm going to be like, see, this is why I shouldn't have even ever tried it. This was awful. This is how we think disagreeing with someone's going to go, right? We think it's just going to be messy and fumbly and potentially really embarrassing and make things worse. And so we just shy away from it completely. So I was reading for grad school recently. So I'm getting my master's in organizational leadership and I was reading for grad school and it was late at night and it was late enough that I was like, I could close my eyes at any given moment. And I started reading this article as one of my assignments for the week. And oh my gosh, I was so into it. I was like, nope, no falling asleep here. I like perked up, sat up, like got out a couple highlighters. It was so good. And as I was reading the article, I was like, I have to do a podcast episode on this because it was all about the importance of disagreement and also how to do it, the skill of disagreement. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I think this is so important and so valuable. And I've seen over and over again as I've coached with people and as I've done this myself, as I've stepped into uncomfortable places and put my hand up to be like, hey, like I actually think something different. Or as I've opened up space to hear someone else's different opinion, I've seen the wonderful gifts that can come from being able to navigate a disagreement successfully. But I've also seen how we shut down out of fear and trepidation and don't step into disagreement. And then we have so many things that can be lost. And there's a cost of lost opportunity there that I think we're not talking about often enough. So the article that I was reading for school was an article from the Harvard Business Review. I'm going to link it up in the show notes. It was called Managing a Polarized Workforce: How to Foster Debate and Promote Trust. So this is really about having conversations in thoughtful, intentional, strategic ways so that the gift on the other side is that we come together, we co-create a solution, but we're promoting trust, we're building trust. Disagreeing is also part of relationship building, right? If we only are in relationships where we are upholding constant agreement, then how strong, sturdy, and healthy can that relationship actually be? So this research that came out of this article from the folks at Harvard, they did a survey and only 39% of the survey respondents reported being trained or coached in handling workplace conflict. Only 39% of people are coached in handling workplace conflict. So if we're not coached in this, it's like if I'm not coached in water skiing, am I going to be able to just do it by myself, get out there and figure it all out? Probably not. Am I going to want to do that? Probably not, for sure, right? So we're probably just going to shy away from the thing that we have no skill set around and no comfort around. Among those who did receive coaching as a part of a leadership development program or as part of executive coaching, listen to this number, 96% of them said that it helped them deal with conflict more effectively. So of those who got the coaching, it was only 39% of them, but of those that got the coaching, 96% of those people said that they were able to engage in conflict more effectively. And 73% of them said it made them feel more confident and comfortable engaging in disagreements. And 62% felt that they were able to turn potentially destructive conflicts into productive ones. So this is gold in here for a couple things. Gold for get yourself a coach. So hello, sarahdean.com. Let's talk about coaching. I can help you with this. But number two, that if we get some practice around this and build some confidence around this, what happens is situations that would otherwise be destructive become productive. And what do we gain when we can turn something that has the potential to be destructive into something productive? This is huge, right? Why wouldn't we want to work on this? Why wouldn't we challenge ourselves as leaders to get more comfortable and skilled in disagreement? We must practice this, though. This is just like any form of communication. So if you've ever heard me speak, and I've said it here on the podcast before, I always talk about communication is something that has to be practiced. Different forms and new forms of communication that are different than what we're used to have to be practiced than all the stuff that we're used to doing. We don't do one workout and then determine like, oh, now I'm suddenly fit. We don't eat one piece of broccoli and like, oh, now my heart is so healthy, I don't have to ever eat broccoli again. We have to do things repeatedly over time for our body to become conditioned to them and for them to become routine and to become our natural defaults. This goes for all forms of communication, especially communication that is new, different, uncomfortable. So disagreeing is a form of communication that we have to practice in order to get comfort with it, in order to build confidence with it, and in order to be able to strategically set it up so that we can be creating and working toward something that's mutually beneficial in that disagreement. The point of disagreement is not for one person to prove the other person wrong or vice versa. The point of disagreement is how can we work through this together so that at the end we both feel like we got something valuable, useful, productive, helpful, supportive, right? When we don't understand how to go into a conversation to navigate disagreement and to find a way through it in which everyone can feel like they got something valuable, supportive, helpful at the end, then we're missing a huge opportunity. And we're much more likely to end up in that place where things feel destructive. So there's some myths around disagreement. And I'm hoping that this will be a little bit of a light bulb moment for you. And you probably can even think of some examples that are relative to these myths as we talk through this. This for me was really hopeful because I think as someone who doesn't like disagreement, very conflict averse. I grew up in a very conflict averse household. My mom grew up in a conflict averse household. Like I just come from a long line of people who don't like conflict. And so I don't like conflict, don't like confrontation. Disagreement is really hard. It's just easier to go with the flow. Like let it just like sweep it under the mat. Let's not make anyone uncomfortable, right? So for those of you that are with me, these myths of disagreement, I find to be really helpful and hopeful in terms of helping us realize that things don't have to feel hard and messy and ugly and sticky when we're in disagreement. So the first myth of disagreement that they talked about in this article was that people who disagree with us do so because they're uninformed or unintelligent. So guilty as charged on this one. When we know that someone disagrees with us, we quickly go into this default of like, well, they just don't know anything. We see this so much in politics right now. So one side is like, well, they're not smart enough. They don't have the right education. They don't have the right resources. They're not reading the right news. So they're just uninformed and unintelligent. That's a myth. Usually the person on the other side, they might have different knowledge than us and different education or different background, but they're usually not completely uninformed. So if we can recognize that they actually are informed, but maybe in a different way than us, then how can we bring together a bigger knowledge pool to leverage that toward a solution, to leverage that toward figuring something out together, right? The second myth is that disagreements will make people defensive. So this one in particular, I had to like pause because I always assume that I'm going to go in, not always, but I usually assume I'm going to go into a conversation where I'm not going to be on the same page with someone. And I assume that people are going to be defensive. So I'm like, okay, if I say this and they're going to say this and then I'm like, they'll get defensive, then I'm going to get defensive. And we have these whole conversations in our head, right? We like see the whole thing playing out. We're like, we're both so mad and then I'm going to storm out and I'm going to say this and I'm going to get the last word. And like, we visualize the whole thing about like how it's just going to go so sideways. And the reality is that disagreements don't have to make people defensive. And there are people who are very open to being in conversation with someone who doesn't feel the same as them and exploring that and being in that space together and figuring it out and feeling your way together. So let's debunk this idea that disagreements are going to make people defensive because they absolutely don't have to. And if we are strategic about how we go into a conversation, we can also be really thoughtful around how we can set up a conversation so that someone doesn't necessarily need to default to defensiveness. Now, we can't control how other people respond. So this isn't to say that like you can put a lot of parameters in place and someone might still get defensive, but there's some things that you can do that will make it less likely, that people will feel more invited into the conversation in a certain way versus feeling like backed up on their heels. And then the third myth of disagreement is that disagreement is bad. And so if you were raised in a conflict averse environment, you might, like me, be like, I just don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Like, disagreements are bad. People are going to get mad. When we think about disagreements being bad, we also make this assumption, I think, that like there's not going to be any resolution. Or same thing with disagreements make people defensive. We're just like, well, there's no one's going to win. So if it's not going to go anywhere, I'm just not even going to try. So we really we complete the process before we even start it by operating under these myths or assumptions that this is bad, I'm not going to get anywhere, this person's going to get mad, then I'm going to get mad, then I'm going to storm out. Like, we make up this whole narrative in these stories that are often really, really untrue. And they're really doing a disservice to our own integrity and humanity, as well as the integrity and the humanity of the person that we are potentially going to be in this conversation or disagreement with. We could potentially give ourselves the benefit of the doubt and say like, hey, I'm a pretty reasonable, level-headed, curious, and compassionate person. And I'm going to assume that the person that I'm entering into this conversation with is also reasonably level-headed and amicable and, wants to figure things out with me too. So we can make that assumption that like we're in it together and that we're both going to be high integrity, respectful, kind, compassionate, curious people who are trying to like understand each other. Then we can go in with this assumption that like, oh, we're going to get to a better place. I don't know where that place is going to be, but I'm here to figure it out together, and we get to be in it together to do that. I had the opportunity to read a really great book last summer about for a team building class called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you've read it. It's a fable. It's a short book, or you can listen to it on audio. I think it's just a couple hours. But it's a really great book that talks about a leader going in as a new leader in an organization and how she really brings out all these different leadership styles, leadership types, and personalities. And how for her, she's like, I have to get them into disagreement mode. If I just create this place where like everyone gets along, I'm not doing my job. And so she talks through like how she does this, how she lets disagreement bubble to the surface, how she really creates space to make that happen intentionally, and then just sits back while people navigate and figure out how they're going to interact with one another, how they're going to, get on the same page, how they're going to find the places that they agree in order to find solutions that everyone can move forward with. It's a really, really good read if you're looking for a story that kind of shows how this can be personified in an organization. It's really, really great read. So that's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I'll also link that in the show notes. When we're looking at disagreement and we're looking at practices, if someone comes to you, so there's one thing if I want to like go in and preemptively set up a conversation, but if someone comes to you, and maybe you can tell like they're on the defense coming in, they're just coming in hot, they're already mad at you or frustrated or whatever, and you're just like, oh, okay, I got to figure this out, and I don't want to go into that defensive place. What can you do? So you can practice the listening triangle. So again, this is the work from out of Harvard, but you can practice this listening triangle with these 3 steps. So the first one is to ask for information, to ask for like, hey, tell me your perspective here. Give me your point of view. Like, I want to hear it all. So just opening the floor for listening. The second step of the triangle, actually listen. So let the person talk, let them get it all out. Don't interrupt them. Don't try to talk over them. Don't cut them off. Don't be interruptive. And also listen for the sake of listening rather than listening for the sake of responding. If you have a fast brain, which I do, so my brain is always trying to be like 2 steps ahead of the person talking, thinking about what I'm going to say about what they just said. So I'm already jumping ahead to my part in the conversation while they're still talking, which does no service to me or to them. This is not how to have a high integrity conversation. So this is something I always have to work on, is like be in this moment listening. So it's opening the door for them to have the stage, and then it's actually actively listening until they're done. And then restating in your own words, the third part of the triangle here, restating in your own words what they said, mirroring it back, reflecting it back to them, to make sure you have it correct. So they say like, hey, I'm so mad because this happened, and then you did this, and this was the fallout, and I can't even believe it. And you're just listening. And then you restate it and reflect it back. So what I'm hearing you say is that this happened. And then here was the fallout, and here's how you were feeling. Here's where you think I went wrong. and then pausing. You could say, do I have that right? Or is there anything else you want to add? Or you can just pause and see like, where do they go with that? Do they tell you that you have it right? If they're like, no, also this, or no, you have that wrong, or you interpreted it wrong, like that's a place right there for you to find common ground or to get further clarification. And so asking another question, like, hey, tell me more about this part, or hey, what am I missing about this? So then from there, we can start to work together. Once they feel honored, like you've actually heard what they have to say. We often think that we have to have a rebuttal, and sometimes just the listening part allows us to take a step toward a solution where we don't have to have a rebuttal. We don't have to get defensive. Sometimes there's not value in having the rebuttal or getting defensive. Instead, the value can be in, I see your perspective. I see what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. And I can tell this is really important to you. And because that's important, this is important to you, that makes it important to me. And I want to work on you. I want to work on this with you. So how can we do this together? So there's a place to just step right in and meet them where they're at and honor where they're at. When we're thinking about how we can signal receptiveness or signal that we're really listening and paying attention and that we want to be in a partnership with someone, there's a few different things that we can do. So I talked probably, 10, 20 episodes ago, I talked about my gap strategy, where when you are in a conversation with someone, you go in with gratitude, acknowledgement. So gratitude, like, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. Acknowledgement, like, I know that we're on the same page in this way, and I want to be able to find a solution with you. And then partnership, how can we move forward together? So gratitude, acknowledgement, partnership. I talked about that gap strategy. If I'm wanting to show receptiveness, I'm wanting to show that I'm really learning. I'm wanting to show that, like, hey, we're not on the same page right now, but it's important to me that we get on the same page. And I believe that we can do this together. There's a few things that you can do to signal, hey, I'm in this with you. That signals like, I appreciate you showing up. I am here to hear what you have to say. And also I'm here to partner with you to find a better way forward. So there's four techniques that Harvard is suggesting to signal receptiveness. And these are really, really helpful. So it's called their HEAR method, HEAR. It's an acronym. The H is about hedging your claims. So the H is about hedging your claims in a way where you are not using superlatives. Like, every time I do this, you never do that. It's always this way. Instead, it's more from a place of curiosity. You're hedging a claim from a curious standpoint. I think it might be possible that, or sometimes this happens when, or I've noticed some people seem to think this. And so you're saying, like, sometimes, maybe, every now and then. So we're using instances rather than superlatives. We're using, like, at times it can be this way, rather than it's always this way and you never do that. Like a 5-year-old talks, or a really cranky mom of a 5-year-old sometimes. So hedging your claims is like leaning in with the person, but not stating it in a superlative way where they might be on the defensive. The E in the HEAR method stands for emphasizing agreement. This part is so crucial. And this is part of the gap strategy as well. It's like acknowledging, hey, I can see this is really important to you. Like, and then they can agree, right? Like, yes, this is really important to me. Okay, I would love to work on this with you because I know that we both really value X, Y, Z. And then the person's like, yes, I value that too. So where can you emphasize agreement? Because when you can emphasize agreement, even if it's just one little thing, you have a starting point. That's where the work begins. So emphasizing agreement can sound something like, I think that we both want XYZ, or I agree with some of what you're saying. I agree with this piece of what you're saying, or I can tell that we're both concerned with whatever. And anytime that you can get any sort of values alignment to say, like, I can tell it's really important for both of us to, uphold the mission of the company. I can tell it's really important for both of us to be respectful in this moment. I can tell that we both really care about our work. I can tell that we're both really, invested in a positive outcome. Anything where we can get on the same page, now we have a place to begin. The A in HEAR stands for acknowledging the other person's perspective. And that's what you've done in going through that listening triangle. Acknowledging that perspective where you can say, I understand that I understand your perspective of whatever, fill in the blank. Or I see your point around XYZ. Or it sounds like what you're trying to say is blah, blah, blah. So acknowledging that perspective so that they're like, yes, she gets it or he gets it. They know what I'm saying. And then reframing, the R is for reframing in positive terms. So how can you then go somewhere positive? Instead of, again, going on that defense, you've acknowledged what they're saying. You've emphasized agreement. You've acknowledged like, hey, at the top, hedging your claim, like, yeah, sometimes this happens this way, or sometimes people experience it this way. You're reframing in positive terms. I really appreciate it when you bring these hard questions to me. I really appreciate it when you tell me everything that's going on. I really appreciate it when you trust me with an issue. I really appreciate it when you explain things to me when I really have the chance to listen. I really appreciate whatever the thing is. Or I think it's great when we have differing perspectives because we can be more creative with solutions. I think it's great when we don't all agree because then we are in a place where we can consider things we've never had to consider before. And we know when we consider new things that we come up with better ideas, or that we come up with more diverse perspectives or solutions, or that we come up with, innovative ways to do things that advance the mission of the company. So I think it's great one is another good one. And then another reframe in positive terms might be, it would be so wonderful if, so it would be so great. I would love it if. So to be able to say, oh, I would love it if we could co-create something where we both feel really good about the outcome. It would be so wonderful if we could sit down and spend some time together, really looking at your big goal here, or our joint goals here. It would really be great if we could find a way where we can both get what we want and uphold the mission of the organization or the team. It would be really great, really wonderful if we could, each map out a few ideas and then come back to the table and see what ones have some overlap to them. So that reframing in positive terms. So I want you to think through now. Is there a place where you've been sitting back from a conversation because you're afraid of disagreement? And what could that be costing you? And what are some potential benefits and some potential positive outcomes that might come your way if you could step into that disagreement? If you could step into that place where you're like, hey, I know we might not be on the same page here and I want to explore that. How can you walk away from those assumptions that you have about disagreement, the discomfort, the messiness, that people are going to be defensive, that disagreeing is bad, and that I hate conflict, and instead look at an opportunity to listen and learn something new in order to find a good solution moving forward. So using that listening triangle and then using that here method of hedging your claims, emphasizing agreement, acknowledging other perspectives, and reframing things in positive terms so that then you can move forward together and find a path or a solution. I hope this episode was helpful. I hope that you're feeling a little bit excited about disagreements now. One of my favorite things is when we can take a skill that feels really daunting, scary, overwhelming, intimidating, and we can turn it into something that feels a little bit like a fun challenge where we feel like I could do this thing and I could learn how to do it in a way that could have a lot of long-term benefits, that could take me to places I haven't been before, and that could really advance my leadership in ways where I could feel more unstoppable. I could feel, more secure. I could feel less timid in certain situations. If we're someone who can feel confident in disagreement, what does that unlock for our leadership potential? So share this episode with other leaders who might benefit from this information. Thank you for being here. I can't wait to be back with you next week. And until then, remember that I'm in this with you always. Thank you for allowing me to spend time in your ear today. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel. To learn more about my speaking, training, and coaching services, visit saradean.com. That's SARADEAN. I would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn at saradean.com/LinkedIn or on Instagram at saradeanspeaks. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding space for you today and every single day.